you deal with that stress. You don't know what to do. You're bringing in all these resources, doing the wrong things and focusing on the wrong items and doing everything wrong, right? So you learn a lot in those first couple of years, but it's the best thing you can ever do because your learning curve is like this and you're just getting better and better,
Welcome to The Real Deal, a commercial real estate investing podcast. I'm your host, Aman. There's a ton going on in the world right now, and much of it impacts real estate investors. The Real Deal podcast will take a look at what's happening and how it influences you as a real estate investor. Each episode is a 20-minute segment dedicated to distilling the day's most important news, so you can stay up to date on what's going on in the world and how it might affect the commercial real estate market.
Welcome back to another episode of the Cashflow Capitalist Show. My name is Aman, and today we have a very special guest. His name is Mathew Owens. Hey, Mathew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Glad to be on.
So, Mathew, give us your 30-second introduction, who you are.
Okay, so I'm a CPA. I quit my CPA firm job in 2006 to go into real estate full-time. Was a real estate genius for about a year and a half before I ended up getting punched in the face and taking a massive hit by the real estate market. Since then, we've now flipped over 1,000 houses. We have a little bit over 35 million lent out to flippers in different markets around the country. We do a lot of value add multifamilies and operational on that side. And then we also go through and, hold properties for buy and holds and do a lot of syndication investing where we raise capital from different investors. We invest ourselves into different syndications, whether that's debt, single family, multifamily, short-term rentals, marijuana farms, other different types of medical device companies, different operators that we think are, performing in different ways. Most of it relates to real estate in different ways, and we really love real estate. That's my background. But a lot of what we do is an entrepreneur is find the right operators that are making money in their niche so we can make money along with them and support them with that, of course, with the right homework and due diligence that goes into that, which is quite a bit, of course. So, but yeah, it's a lot more fun than doing taxes and accounting for a CPA firm, for sure.
So you said word we. What is we?
So OCG is my company, and my brother is my business partner. I also have multiple people that work with me consistently, different asset management, operations managers, all different types of people that work with me consistently on my different projects in different ways. So we bring in a lot of outside subcontractors. Got it. We have them as partners of our companies in different ways. So there's a lot of different, structuring components to that, depending on the project specifically that we're working on.
So when you were working as a CPA, how did you get into real estate side of that? Like, how did you get into real estate?
So, at first I was banging my head against the computer going, how do I do stupid tax returns and audits nonstop? It's the most annoying thing on the planet to have to do that stuff. And I just wanted a way out, right? Like I was looking for a way to start working for myself or start making more money or doing something different because I was quite frankly just bored out of my mind. The CPA stuff was not my personality. And I also had worked doing a lot of audits on bigger apartment buildings and things like that for government subsidized apartment buildings. So I kind of saw some of the inner workings of that and had a little bit of an interest in it. And actually my stepbrother came to me one day, I was reading books on how to open a bar or how to do different businesses going, I don't know what to do, and he came to me one day with an opportunity to say, hey, come to me to this class that I'm going to, and, you got to go check it out. And I immediately mentally was like, how much did you pay, dude? You got jacked. For sure you got jacked. I don't know what you paid. But he ended up saying he spent like 16 grand and It was a real estate investment course. And I was actually, I was going to totally flake on him. And I ended up going to the meeting and was like, oh my God, this is for me. It was a whole real estate class for like 2 years on flipping and holding and self-directing your retirement accounts into real estate and lending and every aspect of, real estate investing to give me a taste for what was out there. And I got my first deal under contract that I was going to make 30 grand on. I ended up making 20. And then I quit my CPA firm job and just threw myself to the wolves. And that was like 2006. So right. And so, of course, I thought I was a real estate genius for like a year and a half before I realized the market was what was, pushing us along. It wasn't me at all, So,
Yeah.
and then you learn those lessons. It's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, though, losing everything that early,
Yep.
because it
Yep.
taught me how to stand back up and how to have a
Yeah.
strong mindset and push forward and, do the right thing and make sure my investors were taken care of.
And it's kind of funny that you said you were feeling like you were a real estate genius, because I remember when COVID happened, I started investing in stocks. That was my first investment. I made like a couple $100. I'm like, I'm a Warren Buffett.
Yeah,
So
a lot of crypto millionaires during that time
yeah,
too, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And so you started from flipping, or you started from multifamily before?
So I started with flipping single family houses, and my very first flip was a duplex, and we actually started off on that trail flipping. But our whole thought pattern was, let's go buy, renovate these, and flip some, and then hold some, and do the Burr method. Buy,
Yeah,
rent, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat.
yeah,
Do that over and over and over again, and pull our capital out and things like that. And that was our primary thought pattern with regard to that strategy. And we were doing that along with our flips as well to keep the lights on, of course, and learning how to run a business, quite honestly. Even though I'm a CPA, you
yep,
don't know anything about really running a business right away. And it really
yep,
comes down to, how are you going to stick and move? How are you going to move when things are challenging? Now I deal with 12 problems before noon on a Monday, and I'm like, I laugh it off like, yeah, whatever. That's part of the business,
yeah,
versus before, you deal with that stress. You don't know what to do. You're bringing in all these resources, doing the wrong
yeah,
things and focusing on the wrong
yeah,
items and doing everything wrong, right? So
yeah,
you learn a lot in those first couple of years, but it's the
yeah,
best thing you can ever do, because your learning curve is like this, and you're just getting
yeah,
better and better, So.
yep. That's right. That's absolutely right. Do you mind sharing the story of your first flip?
Yeah, so I ended up going and getting, my first flip under contract, where I was going to make like 30 grand. Me and my stepbrother got it under contract, and we went through and started to renovate the property. We found a team on the ground out in Memphis, Tennessee. We ended up finding the property that needed renovation at the time from another wholesaler out in the market. And then we went and bought the property, started doing the renovation,
Cool.
realizing that we were way in over our heads with regard to the renovation. It cost more money than we thought. We utilized our retirement accounts and stuff like that, and doing different creative loans and stuff like that to do these things. And then went and flipped the property. At the end of the day, it took about double as long as we thought it was going to take. Had to deal with contractor headaches, had to deal with property management headaches and things like that, because we were buying it, renovating it, tenanting it, and then reselling it to another investor that wanted the cash flow for it, instead of selling it on the open market specifically. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. Perfect. Wow. But you went to Tennessee. Like, how did you manage the project? But I mean,
So
California.
we had a team, and we flew out there, of course, and spent a bunch of money on traveling,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
wasn't worth it, at the time. But we're looking at the areas. We drove out there a few times, looking at properties, for example, developing the team members, developing the realtors and the contractors and things like that before we pulled the trigger, of course. But at the end of the day, your team is everything. And so you really need to get multiple contractors and multiple realtors and multiple team members in every category to start, while you're building your, portfolio there and building your income streams. But, going through that on that first flip, there's a lot of learning. Every little change, it's major stress. Now there's a small issue that comes up, and it's like, yeah, that happens. It's part of it, So.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And let's talk about the capital raising. You mentioned last time when you spoke, you raised almost like $150 million.
Yes. Over the last 15 plus years. Yeah.
And how did that happen? Like, first of all, who is your ideal investor?
So, to start off, our ideal investor is, someone that wants to be passive, that just wants a return on their capital, doesn't want to have to deal with the operations involved and things like that, versus the person that's still building their portfolio up that needs to go do that active work to gain the capital. We're just looking for the people that maybe they already have a full-time job. There are CPAs like me that are working, a ton and not really, able to go and learn every aspect and do all the operations associated with the flip specifically, right?
Yeah.
So those types of things I think was actually, really key here to being able to, to raise the capital, is understanding who my ideal investor was that didn't have the time. There were doctors, CPAs, attorneys, different people like that really needed the help involved with regard to, the operational expertise and the operational work done for them. So we would go and do those types of things consistently and find those avatars and find the team that would do it on the ground for us and manage them while we brought in the other investors on the other side. And so we started off with that 150,000 with our single family flips, just raising individual capital for these things over and over again. And then after that, we started graduating into multifamily deals. We started lending capital and raising money from private investors for those lending opportunities and things like that. We started raising money from banks and insurance companies and those types of investors too, those more institutional types for our debt and different strategies. So
can you share again, who is your ideal investor and why? I think let's keep recording now. Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as my ideal investor goes, it's a passive investor that is looking for opportunities that they can rely and work with other operators that are doing the actual operations work, right? So the people that already have the teams on the ground, that already have the knowledge on that specific, strategy, right? Like fix and flips or buy and holds or multifamily or mobile homes or promissory notes. The people that they're looking for people that have those expertise, that specialize in those categories, which is what I do. And then we go through and help investors to invest passively in those things and try to structure it so that they're protected with the paperwork and all that kind of stuff and involved. And so we're looking for the W-2 person or the person that's self-employed that doesn't have time to learn every aspect of all these different strategies. And now by utilizing other operators that they can invest with, they can diversify their investments in all of these different strategies with all these different markets and all these different operators and asset classes to be able to diversify into without having to do the work themselves. And they get massive tax benefits for doing it. It's actually pretty cool. I invest in a lot of these too because I can't do all the work myself. I have to be passive sometimes. And I got an 8-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter and or 5-year-old daughter now, and she just turned 5. And, you realize like what's important in life is spending time with the family and people like that, so it's really key.
And where do you connect with these investors? Where do you find them?
So in the very beginning, when I first started out raising capital, I actually started raising and going to networking events. So I was going to 4 to 5 networking events every single week for like 2-3+ years, just developing relationship after relationship after relationship, whether that's lunch meetings, chambers of commerce, throwing my own events, doing all different types of stuff where I would, go to meetup.com, find the calendars for the city, go through and find all the networking events out there and then the different clubs you could join just to network with like-minded people you start developing resources and finding new ways of making money. So not only are you raising capital from a lot of the people in the room, but you're finding all these new strategies on how they make money in different ways. And now you can go and take their resources and give it to other people too and help other people with those resources. And you become, a massive resource for all different types of investors, from the active side of things to the passive side of things as well, and be able to be useful to a lot of people, which means that you can make a lot of money in different ways serving those people.
So when you meet a new investor who never invested before, how do you pitch to them that you can make money, you can get tax benefits, you can how do you pitch your deal or anything to them?
So first, I show them the benefits associated with these types of strategies, right? Being able to
Mhm.
diversify with all these asset classes, operators, and markets without
Mhm.
having to do the work. Getting massive tax benefits, of course, for just buying an overall investment in the first place, right? Being able to get a cash flow stream that's going to beat out the typical stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and things like that, where you can rely on that and actually retire off of that income instead of trying to invest for capital gains in those traditional ways, and actually have control over your future through doing these types of strategies. At the same
Mhm.
time, I also try to convince them not to do it if they haven't done the right homework, right? They need to
Yep.
learn how the legal documents work and the provisions in those and the right legal
Yep.
structuring, how to do the homework on the operator in the first place, how to actually do the homework on the deal, the market, the financial model associated with that deal, and their conservative or lack thereof assumptions that they put within those financial models, and what's
Mhm.
reasonable and what's not with regard to those assumptions. And so
Yep.
bringing in outside help that can help them, attorneys and other operators and other people that invest in these, to get their advice is key before they can start really investing. They may be able to dip their toe in and do a little bit, but without actually having the understanding of the due diligence process, people should not be investing in the first place into
Mhm.
these different operations, because they're going to end up with operators that don't know what they're doing, that are not structured right, that all make all
Yep.
their money up front instead of on the back end,
Yep.
along with investors with performance-based incentives in place. So the
Yep.
investors get paid first, and they're going to end up
Mhm.
in those bad situations and have some losses. I've had losses. There's
Mhm.
losses out there that occur, of course.
Yep.
That's why you put smaller chunks of money with all these things. So if I have 25, 50 grand across 100 opportunities and one of them doesn't really perform, or I take a 10% haircut or something like that on it, I'm really not stressed out, right? Because I've
Yep.
got all these other ones over here performing. And that's really the idea behind that, is to
Mhm.
diversify so that you don't put all your eggs in one basket and aren't
Mhm.
really hurting. You got to make sure that
Yep.
you're covered there.
Got it. Got it. And what KPIs do you keep in mind when you like track the capital attraction?
So really, number of investors that I'm bringing in on a weekly basis into my systems, right? And then
Mhm.
there's a nurturing period that occurs because people got to get to know you. They can't just expect
Yep.
them to invest with you without getting to know you. So we utilize Syndication Pro for our investments, and then we utilize Active Campaign for a lot of our lead generation and email nurturing systems and contact management type systems and sales systems, right? And so it's a
Mhm.
matter of what's our open rate on our emails and click-through rates on our emails, to see what kind of interest and traction we're getting on the content that we're putting out, or the education that we're just giving away to people to teach them, right? And then
Yep.
same thing with how many leads are coming in, how many people are in your pipeline that have expressed interest, how many people have committed, and how
Mhm.
much money is that, what's your average investment that's coming in consistently. So now you can say, with this much output on the
Mhm.
marketing, with this system that I'm doing with newsletters and social media and all the different marketing aspects, how many is coming in the door, how many is interested, how many people, how much capital does that pertain to, what's my close ratio on the intake of leads versus the closing of those leads, how long does it take for that a typical lead to come in the door all the way through to when they typically on average invest with you, because there's a nurturing period that occurs as they get to know you and who you are as a person and what you do. And sometimes it's, hey, they're not
Mhm.
interested in anything you're providing right now, but you come up with that one opportunity and that piques their interest, and that's what gets them to move forward with
Mhm.
you on that. But really, it's developing the
Mhm.
relationship over a period of
Yep.
time, to really wrap that up, because otherwise it's hard. And asking for referrals, how many different people are bringing you relationships all
Mm.
the time, and where are they coming from? Those are the key things to really dial in. But keep in mind, you won't ever, even with all these metrics, with all these tools, you won't ever be able to really gain a massive amount of traction on
Mhm.
raising capital if you don't know all the ways to protect investors, and you don't
Mhm.
understand the risk mitigation techniques within
Mm.
each project as a whole. You have to be able to explain that to people and explain to them, here are the risks. Here's how we think we've mitigated them. You make a determination if those risk mitigation things that we put in place and that we've covered is good or not enough for your personality and what you're comfortable with, So that's really the key to the whole thing, is understanding that piece of it, and also understanding, hey, what are they really looking for with regard to, an investment and commitment there,
So you're recommending being more defensive than offensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Almost, you're almost explaining to them why they shouldn't invest. You're explaining all of the risks that you can think of, and sometimes you're going to meet sophisticated investors that are going to come up with a risk that you don't realize, right? That you don't even see, and that's great for your own education. And always admit to those errors that you make, or those things that you didn't see, because they help you a ton long term.
Yep. So you mentioned about newsletter, social media. So beside that, what do you use to stay in touch with the investors, and how do you inform them?
So one, I keep them up to date on all of our new investments as they come out, and we do an email campaign for that, right? We do that newsletter that goes out every week to basically new content, new information that's coming out. Always trying to help them, whether it's a podcast or a YouTube video or other content that has come up. Some of our speaking engagements, those types of things where they can just get to know us. That's all that's happening, is they're getting to know us over that period of time, and we're teaching them through giving away free information, and great content for them to consume and educate themselves with, right, on a number of different topics that they may be interested to understand. And then in addition to that, we have a nurturing campaign where if someone comes into our system, it's like, here's a 4 email sequence that goes out to them over a few weeks, where it says, hey, here's what we do. Oh, by the way, here's an example of a couple of the strategies we implemented. Here's another example. Here's some ways we help people with some free education. And then the next email sequence that comes out after those 4 emails is, hey, do you want to schedule a call with us and talk about how we can help each other, right? So, and it's those types, and then that might be a 3 email sequence at that point. And if they don't do anything, then they go back into our email database and they're just marketed to on our newsletter, right? We don't want to blast them forever on the nurturing campaign. People put in place re-engagement campaigns and things like that, and a campaign whenever you have a new deal that you're coming out with as well. So all of those things are key from a systems perspective to get them on the phone to be able to have a conversation about these topics, right? So,
and when any new investor schedule a call with you, can you walk us through a successful strategy call with investor, first call?
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing you want to do is you want to shut up at the end of the day. You want to shut up and let them give you as much information as possible. Let them explain to you what their interest is and how they think that you can help them at that point, right? You want to make sure that you're able to understand their situation without blurting out the mouth, because when you do that, and I have a hard time because I want to teach everybody stuff, but really you want to go through and be quiet, let them explain their situation and add value where you can, and take notes so that, you now, after listening to their situation, understand their 3 main pain points. And you're just taking notes the whole time going, great, here's my solution for each one of those potential pain points and how I can help, in that situation. And also what additional education that you might have on deck that you can send them to teach them about that particular pain point, because it's not going to take a 30-minute or a 1-hour meeting for them to, want to invest or get enough knowledge base to feel comfortable. So you're going through and listening to them first, writing down all their pain points, and also at the same time jotting down, mental steps on how you can solve those pain points and just help them any way you can. And you're not selling anything. If they're not interested in what you have, then no problem. Give them a referral to somebody else. Karma will come back to you if that's what they need, So that's really the key to the entire call, as the first call.
And how do you screen the investors? Have you ever had any experience that you had to say no to investor?
Absolutely. We had experiences where we had to say no to investors. So I had one client that he called and got paid off on a promissory note, and he signed the release of the mortgage that secured his money by the property and sent it back to the closing attorney because we were selling the property, and he got paid back. And he was extremely angry because he wasn't making any more interest anymore because he got paid back his money. And he called and started yelling at my team saying, I can't believe I'm not getting interest anymore. This is crazy. You guys are screwing me because I'm not getting my interest anymore. I'm like, bro, you signed a release. You knew it was getting paid off. And we could have new investments for you. But after that, I was like, yeah, you're done, dude. Like, you don't have enough knowledge base yet in order to invest. And so if they don't have the right knowledge base, and then they may not be very good investors for you. Or if they're investing their last $20,000 or $10,000 with us, then sometimes or many times, if not all the time, I'll say no to those investors because I don't want you. And you should be having 6 to 12 months of personal living expenses aside, have all that ready before you start to invest your money into long-term investments that are locked up for a while, you know? So that's usually when I'll say no, is they don't have the right knowledge base, or they have an emotional, problem or screw loose there, or, they really shouldn't be investing because it's not enough for them to have that other money and protect themselves financially. Because not everybody thinks about that when they're investing is, man, I need to make sure I have money for the next 6 months, set aside first.
Yeah. And I think they do not understand the risk behind that too.
Right. Yeah. It's highly risky for sure to not have that nest egg sitting there.
And which apps or tools do you use to attract more capital?
So Syndication Pro is one of the softwares that we use that allows us to put all our different investments on our platform. We just came out with a new website, MathewOwens.com, that basically talks about all the different stuff that we do as clients, and then or as operators, and bringing investments to the table for our clients. And then we use a number of different tools. We use Monday.com for marketing organization, and as well as operations organization. We use a number of different things like that. We use Google Sheets and created databases inside Google Sheets, basically for a lot of our lending and a lot of our due diligence and processes and procedures there. So being able to show investors those different systems that we have set up and how we're tracking this stuff really significantly increases our ability to close investors and bring in capital, because then they see, what we have in place.
And as we are seeing into the economy is getting crazy and nobody wants to invest, what are the top 3 questions that you are getting asked from the investors?
So one, how do I mitigate risk in, kind of an uncertain economic environment? And it comes down to investing in assets that are risk adverse, that are recession resistant. For example, one of all the funds actually that I'm doing right now carry 0 debt. And I'm doing that on purpose because right now, even though leverage might be very great in an inflationary environment, I don't want the risk of that debt in the first place. I want to be running very lean and being able to make sure I protect my investors' capital first, and having 100% equity and no underlying debt in a situation like that really helps with capital preservation, of course, because you're backed by this hard asset without taking that kind of risk, right? Investing in recession-resistant assets is key. And then I think some of the other pieces, the bigger pieces, are how do I mitigate taxes on my investment, right? So first is, how do I not lose my money? And then how do I get the most out of this investment in the first place? Which a lot of times comes down, whenever you're buying real estate, you can front load the tax benefits through what's called a cost segregation study, where you break apart the property into a bunch of little pieces, and then you front load that depreciation into year 1. And then so you can get a big tax deduction in year 1 for doing that. Now you have passive loss rules where you can only offset that against passive gains if you're not a full-time real estate investor, and then up to $25,000 of ordinary income, subject to an income limit. So my CPA side is coming out. And so, there's things like that, but there's massive benefits for doing this every year, buying assets and getting big tax benefits that then offset all of your other income, or a big chunk of it. And so we do that strategy. And the last one is, look, I really don't know how to do my due diligence on the investments. what are the strategies that I need to deploy in order to do it right, to make sure that this guy I'm investing with over here is not going to steal my money, that I know they know what they're doing, that how do I make sure of all those things? And
Yeah.
it comes down to understanding the due diligence on each one of the segments within that particular asset. So the operator, the operator's team, and doing the background checks, criminal checks, understanding their conservative estimates, their background, understanding what their processes and procedures are within their organization that they plan on managing it, understanding the reporting requirements and accounting side of things that's coming out of that, and who their team is that's backing them up to protect them in that case, to make sure there's proper reporting for investors. So that's kind of the piece on the team and the operations. And there's, a massive checklist for that, right? And then you have the operations on the actual asset in itself, the property in itself, and how that's structured, where it's located in the market, understanding the financial assumptions, what their value add process is going to be. Are they doing a major renovation? Who's the team on that particular, and that it's going to make them perform. So every aspect of this you're breaking down, and we have a 200-point due diligence checklist that we go through on every investment that we do. We can provide that to you guys. It's actually on my website, MathewOwens.com. You can get it for free there and just download it. And so there's a lot of things that people can do if they have a checklist and run through this a few times and then go take it to an attorney and say, hey, this is the homework I did. Is there anything else you can think of I should do? Take it to another professional investor that does this all the time and say, is there anything else I can do to learn those methods in order to do the right homework so that you feel comfortable enough investing? So those are the key things, I think. How to not lose the money, how to make sure that I'm getting the optimal benefits, and then how to do the homework on these deals.
Then how do you provide, or what kind of resources do you provide to investors for the due diligence, like when they come to you for the new deal, when you present the new deal?
So typically when I do a new deal, you always want to have the private placement memorandum, the operating agreement, an investment summary, a video overview of everything, maybe a quick overview because people don't want to watch a 50-minute video right away. And then make sure that you're thinking about all the risks that you can outline and say, here's every risk I can think of, presenting it to them up front. And then how did I mitigate that risk right within the presentation as much as possible, even providing the 200-point due diligence checklist that they can go through on you, giving them background checks on yourself or criminal checks on yourself, doing all those things to say, here's how I should do my homework, and here's investor references. So anybody who's trying to raise money should have a list of investor references or character references that they can provide to their investors that they can call. There's been a number of people that have called my investors all the time to verify that, hey, I'm a good person and I'm doing the right thing and I got their back when it comes to the investing side. And you want to really understand how the operators think about money, right? About your money. Do they think, hey, this is just an investment. If it gets lost, it gets lost. I told them there's risk. Or are they going to put their own money up first, take the hit if they can, and then treat it as for what it really is, which is time that those investors have traded their hours for to get that money, right? So they're working for that. That's hours of their life. That's not really capital. It's hours of their life. And so, at the end of the day, understanding that from an investor perspective really is key when you're raising money to make sure you protect them at all costs. So
last time when you spoke, you also mentioned you attract or raise capital from international investors. And how do you do that? How do you find them?
So it started off with me doing a presentation in my home like 15 years ago with a couple of other operators. There were flippers here in Southern California that the husband was, Caucasian guy, and the wife was a Japanese investor, and they were raising capital for their own flips here in the U.S. from Japanese clients. And so I met them. We started selling properties and turnkey properties to those investors and setting up translation services for those investors. And then it started snowballing from there into multiple liaisons. And I call them liaisons to help with the translation, help with the investments and everything when we're working with these international clients. And then, of course, dialing in the tax and legal structures, how to get them set up here in the U.S. for proper compliance from the tax side, understand the estate planning issues that they may face and the legal structuring issues. So you can be a resource for them, because what's the biggest thing stopping you from investing in another country? It's typically, how do I know like the government's just not going to go take my stuff, or I'm doing this correctly legally, that I'm protected, right? So if you become a resource and show them how to set up here and protect themselves here and structure it right, you just jumped over a massive hurdle to get them, investing here. And then it comes down to building the trust along with that and showing them the benefits and worrying about and thinking about the concerns they have in their culture compared to here in the US, because there's definitely different risk mindsets about what's risky and what's important in different cultures, so, understanding those things and bringing in a lot of liaisons that help me develop these relationships, that help me as translators and things like that, is one of the keys to being able to raise capital from international clients.
And what kind of laws do you have to keep in mind when you pitch or present your deal to them?
So it definitely depends. So one, U.S. SEC laws, making sure you're compliant there. But also, for example, in Japan, you have to think about the Japanese Ministry of Finance that's like the SEC over there. So if you're marketing to the general public over there, you got to go through the Japanese Ministry of Finance. If you're not, then you're typically okay. Depends on the country involved and their compliance requirements. But you want to make sure that those investors are never going to have a problem either from investing in something that you didn't go through the hoops and jump through correctly when you're bringing it to outside clients like that, right? You definitely don't want to market to the general public and that kind of stuff. Keep the same rules that you think of here in the U.S. from an SEC standpoint, depending on the reg. D exemption or other exemption that you're typically filing under. So normally you don't have the limitations with direct promissory note investing or direct property investing as you do when you're investing in syndications from, the other countries, I'll call it SEC equivalent.
So what kind of tax benefits do international investors get?
So one, they pay tax on what they make here in the U.S. They don't pay the tax on their international earnings, right? So just what they make here on the assets here in the U.S. So they pay the tax here, but like for Japan, for example, they were able to write off a building over 5 years for Japanese tax law. So now we do cost segregations and help them, front load those tax benefits that way. But previously they were able to front load these things and be able to write off an entire purchase of an entire property over 5 years, which is a giant tax benefit for them, right? Now it had to have certain requirements, like it had to be built over 22 years old. It had to be primarily wood built versus brick built. There's some specifics with regard to that, but they were able to take advantage of some of the tax laws there. So it depends on the country. And there's a tax treaty within each country that says, hey, the U.S. and Japan have this tax treaty. Therefore, you have to withhold this much money, remit it to the U.S. government. They do their tax return here in the U.S., and then they get their refunds or, pay based off of how much money they made here in the U.S., just like a normal, resident would, right? But they require you to do withholding instead, just like you would on your paycheck when it's an international client. There are certain exceptions and exemptions to that, but it depends on the country. And if there is no tax treaty, you got to do max withholding for the whole thing and make sure they file here in the U.S.
So do they have to apply for a visa or something when investing in, or they can just do without any U.S. status or something like that?
Typically not. What they're doing is they're filling out a form to get a U.S. tax ID number, and they usually have to have a reason for doing that, like they're buying property or they're investing in a fund or something like that. So that requires them to have a U.S. tax ID number for it to be granted in the first place. And so typically in that case, they're getting set up with like a W-7 form and some other documents that just get mailed in, and they go through and get that tax ID number. And sometimes it can take a few months to get those things, lined up with the government and stuff. So
I have one more question regarding that. I don't know if it's a tax question or immigration question. Can international investor invest in U.S. passively and get the EB-5 visa?
They can. My understanding with it, and I haven't done the EB5 stuff in the past, but I've taken, a few presentations on those and understand the structuring. My understanding is the compliance associated with the getting an EB5 set up for these investors is really significant. So the cost is high. So you have to deal with like $10 million, $20 million plus projects, $50 million plus projects for that stuff to really pencil from the compliance standpoint and the cost standpoint of setting up that EB5 and doing all the paperwork for that EB5 program. So, and create a number of jobs and things like that in that program too, with who you're investing. And I found that the investments that they invest into with the EB5 program are usually not as great because they're getting this secondary benefit associated with it. So, and it's not guaranteed that when they invest in those that they'll get the EB5. So they might have their money in, never get the EB5 and just be stuck with a bad investment, right? So there's some problems there that need to be worked out for sure.
So they need to like more due diligence and understand anything could happen.
Who the operator is, all that stuff.
Yeah. Got it. So what advice would you recommend to somebody who's starting in real estate?
So if you're first starting out, it really comes down to understanding your resources and developing your resources. So the number one thing I would do is start going to networking events, developing as many resources, learning as much as possible, podcasts, books, live presentations. Just immerse yourself in that education. And through that, you're going to learn all these strategies you deploy. You don't have to be a fix and flipper or a buy and hold investor. You don't have to do that. You can go through and do that as a piece of your portfolio, but you can go be a promissory note investor. You can raise capital. You can go through and, deal with different operational expertise and just do pieces of the job, right? There's a number of different strategies that you can deploy out there that aren't necessarily fixing and flipping single family home properties, which is what you would normally think you are as a real estate investor, right? You can do multifamily and mobile homes. It's just as much work of buying a big mobile home park than it is a single family house and doing a fix and flip, right? It's literally, maybe it's a little more initially, but then after you get going, the bang for your buck is way better on the bigger projects than an individual flip. So networking and developing those relationships, education and understanding all the different strategies that are out there, and then understanding what you want to do. How do you want to build your lifestyle here and build the income streams to match what you want to do in your lifestyle? If your goal is time freedom, fixing and flipping or wholesaling, those are jobs. That's not what you want. Maybe you need it to build some cash flow and build it up. But why couldn't you, if you don't need your own money to hold properties, you can just buy the properties with other people's money and get a piece of it for doing all the work, right? You don't have to use your own money and flip to gain cash to then hold. You can hold right from the start. That's probably my biggest regret is selling the 1,000 houses that we flipped, So we do have a good portfolio, but at the same time, you look back and I'm like, I sold that for what in 2012, So so.
And what book would you recommend to somebody who's starting either mindset or education or anything?
I think the best book or books that I would recommend, one, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It really, really does permeate with you over a period of time, especially giving more service than you're paid for, and then you'll never have to worry about money again. That type of concept within the book and some of the strategies they deploy, if you really implement those in your business, you'll explode. The other one is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. I feel like that book was massive and instrumental for me with regard to understanding how people work and how to, move teams and how to build relationships and things like that and add value to people. Those two are my primary. And then there's a book called Traction that's the Entrepreneur Operating System that I think is by Gino Wickman. That's one of the key books that I've read that teach you how to create this system within your businesses.
Got it. And how do you give back to a community?
So we run a nonprofit called For Investors by Investors that teaches financial education and real estate education without a sales pitch.
Yep.
We actually teach a lot for free too. We taught a boot camp for a bunch of Marines from Camp Pendleton a few years ago for 6 months just to teach them real estate strategies. And that turned into a really, really big deal where my team member that's helping with that turned it into a place to be able to create financial freedom for military members coming out of the military called White Feather Investments. And he's been killing it right now and helping all these military members and vets create financial freedom through real estate and these strategies that we deploy.
Got it. And I have, before we wrap this up, I have 3 more questions. Just for a mindset, just be ready for it. So what is your morning routine as entrepreneur?
So I start off with a cup of coffee and meditating. So it's usually what I do first thing in the morning is I try to meditate. I try to read a little bit and stretch as well. Those primary things. I drink a glass of lemon juice every morning as well, lemon juice and water, and to try to clean my system up and stuff like that, and just try to focus on my health first thing in the morning. And then a lot of times, most days, I'll work out usually 4 days a week in the morning time as well. And I try to meditate before coming into the house as well after hours so I can spend more time and be present with the kids, which is hard to do when you're an entrepreneur going 100 miles an hour. So that's my typical routine in the morning time. I try to kick out a few emails after that just to kind of clean them up a little bit. And then I, focus on, what things that I need to get done that day, and focus on, okay, what 5 things can I kick out? What things are going to take me 5 minutes? They're going to make me feel good that I got a bunch of stuff done, and then let me work on some big projects that are going to take a few hours that I got to really focus on.
And if you have to go back in time, you restart all over again, what would you do different?
I don't think I'd sell any houses. I would just hold them all, instead. It's really just a resource thing and a lack of understanding that I didn't need to flip to make money to keep the lights on. I could have built in fee structures and things like that into the holds already to do that. And, in addition to that, I would have went bigger faster. So, and because of the bang for your buck is just there on bigger projects, and went a lot bigger, a lot faster on those projects.
Got it. And imagine today is the last day on this planet. And what message do you want to give to the world? What message do I give to the world? Like that's a question right there. anything. You can say anything. So really, I think just living your truth, live your best self, try to be a good person and help people as best you can. I really think that helping people is a calling and something that will make true happiness happen in your life. And don't forget to live in the moment. Like, go outside, look at the clouds for 5 minutes, go and enjoy the breeze, enjoy the time with your kids when, because it's gone so fast. Go and realize that none of this turmoil and everything we see really matters at the end of the day. If you think about all the stress you had from, call it the government and everybody else in the world for the last 10 years, right? What really occurred that would have changed your life if you didn't worry about any of that at all, right? Nothing would have really changed. Yeah, you want to avoid stuff, you want to be aware, but take that step back, live in the moment and realize what's important. And I would say, read those affirmations every single day so that you can actually have that right mindset, because your mindset is literally everything when it comes to your happiness and your ability to let things, roll off your shoulders, be proactive instead of reactive on your daily routines. Got it. That's a really beautiful message. And if somebody has to reach out to you, where can they reach out to you?
They can go to my website at MathewOwens.com and reach us that way. 1 T in Matthew, so MathewOwens.com.
There you go. And thank you so much, Mathew, for your time and all this information. And I'll see you on the Phoebe.
Nice. Look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Mathew. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on The Real Deal, a commercial real estate investing podcast, the show that covers everything to do with multifamily real estate investing to help you become an expert in your real estate ventures. We're here to help you create passive income and financial freedom so that you can achieve what you want whenever you want. We'll catch you next time on The Real Deal.